Good evening. Some results are beginning to roll in from tonight's midterm election.
We have live team coverage from the biggest races in the state, starting with the governor's race.
Now, our latest exclusive News on 6 poll showed Republican Kevin Stitt with only a 3-point lead over Drew Edmondson. Here's where the voting stands now. You can see 0% of the precincts are reporting, but we have a few numbers because the early voting and also absentee ballots are being counted. Right now, it is neck and neck, both Stitt and Edmondson at 49%, Libertarian Chris Powell at 2%.
Only 31 votes separating the two candidates at this point. News on 6's Lori Fulbright is at Kevin Stitt's watch party in Oklahoma City. Lori?
Well, of course, Craig and Terry, we did expect this to be a close race, and it looks like it's going to be that way. So don't expect to see Kevin Stitt at his watch party, though, until the race has been called. So we were just informed that he's not going to show up until the race has been called. They didn't clarify if that's when the media calls it or that's when the campaign calls it. But they said it's just a logistical issue. He's got a large family, a large contingency of supporters, and there's just not enough room here. So it may be quite a while before we see him. We did see dozens of his employees just get off a bus. They tell us that he chartered that bus for them so they could come over here if they wanted to and support him, and many of them have done that. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Lori. Elsewhere in Oklahoma City, Stitt's opponent Drew Edmondson and his supporters are obviously closely watching these results.
News on 6's Brian Dorman is live at Drew Edmondson's watch party. Brian?
Yeah, Craig, Terry, we certainly have a party here now inside Embassy Suites. You can see all the people that quickly filled up this room in just the past 30 minutes. Supporters of Drew Edmondson here, hoping that he was able to do enough today. Lots of talk in this room about numbers, how many people showed up at the polls today. People telling me they were surprised with how many people showed up at their polling location as well. And of course, in this room, they're hoping that people showed up for Drew Edmondson. Of course, we'll just have to wait and find out. As you said, we're just seeing those early returns coming in from early voting. So we still have 0% of precincts reporting. We'll continue to be here all night watching those numbers come in. Back to you.
And Libertarian Chris Powell is also on the ballot. That's important because just a few percentage points could make a difference in this race.
In that race, absolutely. The congressional seat for Oklahoma's 1st congressional district is up for grabs tonight. Whoever wins will replace Jim Bridenstine, who left to lead NASA.
Here's what we are seeing right now from, once again, those early results. Kevin Hern with an overwhelming lead, but again, these are just early votes that have come in so far.
News on 6's Tristan Land is live with Tim Gilpin's campaign here in Tulsa. Tristan.
Here at the Jazz Hall of Fame, seats are filling up as folks start to trickle on in. Earlier, Tim Gilpin told us that he believes tonight's winner will be based on who was able to get voters to the polls today. Gilpin is a former assistant state attorney general and also served on the Board of Education for 6 years, where he fought for education funding. Tonight, his camp is confident that they have done all that they can to snag the first Democratic nomination for Oklahoma's 1st congressional seat, and of course we'll be here tonight as those returns come in, and we'll be sure to pass those along. Back to you.
And we'll be also, of course, following Kevin Hern's campaign. Stick with News on 6.
Coverage of the 2018 midterm elections. I'm Dave Davis, and you're watching our digital desk coverage. You're watching us on Facebook Live. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight, as we will be with you all evening long, and I'll be with you until just before the start of the 9 p.m. news on the Tulsa CW, but we will be with you all night long on TV. So let's talk about some candidates who are out there right now, their watch parties, and some of our reporters who are with us. And let's go to the results, actually. Let's do the results first. The results first. So the governor's race, still tight, just 1% of those precincts reporting, but you do see Kevin Stitt with about a 2,000 vote lead on Drew Edmondson, 50 to 48%, and then Libertarian Chris Powell, that all important at the bottom of the ticket. In a tight race like this, he has 3% at this point. So Brian Dorman, News on 6's Brian Dorman, is out at Drew Edmondson's watch party in Oklahoma City. And Brian, how's it going out there?
Yeah, Dave, we got quite a party here with the Embassy Suites downtown Oklahoma City. I just want to show you a little bit of the room here. As you can see, people have really quickly filled up this space. This is the Democratic Party as well, so all the candidates from the Democratic side are here at Embassy Suites. This room is just exclusively for Drew Edmondson, so you can see all of the folks that you see here and that you'll see in my live reporting tonight are all supporters of Drew Edmondson. I worked the room a little bit, talked to a few people. They say, you know, some of them are a little bit nervous. Others really think that Drew was able to seal the deal tonight. Everybody I talked with talked about the polling numbers, and Dave, how surprised they were with how many people showed up at their polling locations. A lot of people telling me they were 1,600, 1,800, 2,000, which is high numbers and what they would typically see that they told me at their polling locations when they voted today. So you can see this room full of people of all ages, young and old here, all supporting Drew Edmondson, hoping that, as you mentioned, this is going to be a very, very close race, and that is not a secret. I think both candidates, Kevin Stitt and Drew Edmondson, knew that going into this. It's going to be very interesting seeing the background that both of these candidates have, Dave, with, you know, Kevin Stitt and his business background, and then you have Drew Edmondson with his Attorney General background, also his connections to Green Country, born and raised in Muskogee, the Muskogee County DA for 10 years, and so that was a long time ago, and so we had to see if that's going to resonate with voters still. The other question is going to be money and the president's support. You know, Kevin Stitt was backed by the president, has his endorsement, raised more money than Drew Edmondson did. But Drew said this isn't about money. This is about getting Oklahoma back on track again. In fact, Drew's saying Oklahoma isn't a poor state. We're just a poorly run state. Things that he will take on right away. He said the state's broken. We have overcrowded classrooms. Rural hospitals are closing. Healthcare costs are too high. Prescription drugs are too expensive for the average family. All of those things, he says, if he's elected governor tonight, he will address right away.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. That's Brian Dorman in Oklahoma City at the Drew Edmondson watch party. And a lot of people watching that race, as again, right now, just so early, 1% of precincts reporting, and we're seeing just a 2,000 vote difference between the top two candidates, Kevin Stitt and Drew Edmondson. Let's go now to News on 6's Emery Bryan and turn our attention toward the U.S. House District 1, Congressional District 1, and he is at Kevin Hern's watch party. Hi, Emery.
Hi, Dave. This is the one of the ballrooms at the Renaissance Hotel down at 71st and 169. The room is beginning to fill up here. We'll show you what's going on here. Pretty good crowd that has shown up in just the last few minutes. And in what is probably a sure sign that Kevin Hern expects to win, the candidate himself was in the room just a few minutes ago. As far as watch party experience goes, candidates, if they have any doubt about the outcome, typically don't show up until they are sure. And Kevin Hern came in just a few minutes ago, went around the room, thanked some supporters, just shook some hands before going out to watch election returns. Of course, the Democrat in the 1st District would have is going to have a tough job just because Republicans outnumber Democrat registrations, and that has typically been a Republican seat for a long time. Of course, this is the seat vacated by Jim Bridenstine when he resigned to run for run NASA, and so this empty seat has left a wide open spot. But Kevin Hern has had his eye on this for some time, expecting that Bridenstine would be some point pulled into NASA by the Trump administration. You might remember Bridenstine thought himself for a long time that he was going to be called up, and there was just a lot of waiting. It went a lot further than he thought it would before that call actually came, and he was pulled in to run NASA. So with this open seat, Kevin Hern has been deep in Republican politics in this state for a long time, always behind the scenes. He's an expert in finance. That's his background in education. And of course, he's been an entrepreneur of business with McDonald's franchises. I believe he now has 10 McDonald's franchises in the Tulsa and Muskogee area. But his background is dollars and cents. He's been doing some of that for the Oklahoma GOP on a state level. And that expertise has gotten him a lot of notoriety here in the 1st District and in Oklahoma all over the state. And this is the first time he's run for office. But of course, running for an office, running for this congressional seat, 1st District as a Republican with some roots in a heavily Republican district, he expects to win tonight. Just question for him might be how much. Now, it is not over. We haven't seen all these results come in, but just those early results show an overwhelming majority. We'll, of course, continue to watch, and wouldn't be too surprised if he comes back in pretty shortly, but we'll keep you advised of what's going on here. Dave, back to you.
And certainly something that the National Republican Party is watching as well, a district that they are certainly counting on such a big night like tonight. Thank you very much, Emery, there at Kevin Hearn's watch party. And let's take a look at some election results now. Let's start with state questions, because we've shown you the candidates and how that's all shaking out. Let's start out with 793. All of these, by the way, are constitutional amendments to the Oklahoma Constitution, every single one of them. So this one is about optometrists in retail stores and allowing them to practice there, allowing them to sell prescription glasses there, but also allowing, interestingly, the state legislature to restrict optometrists through the constitutional amendment. So kind of interesting language there, but you're seeing 54% yes on the optometrists in retail stores and 46% no, a 10,000 vote difference. Moving on to Marsy's Law, something that our pollster Bill Shepard was saying, we're seeing overwhelming support from Republicans and Democrats for this. Now with just 3% of precincts reporting 113,000 votes for yes on Marsy's Law and no on 31,000 of those votes are no. Moving on to State Question 798. This is very straightforward. This would combine the governor and lieutenant governor on the same ticket, same party would have the same ticket, and it would begin in the 2026 general election cycle. Well, right now, with early returns, 3% of precincts reporting, we're seeing 47% yes, 53% no. So leaning no there, certainly on State Question 798 in the early running. State Question 800. This one you had to really read through a lot of numbers on the ballot question. It would essentially begin a trust fund using gross production taxes on oil and gas, deposited into a fund, and then a couple years later it could be deposited into the general fund. So right now on this State Question 800, we're seeing yes 43%, no 57%, a big gap there. Again, only 3% of precincts reporting, but already we're seeing nearly 160,000 votes with just 3% of precincts reporting for that. We have got State Question 801 then, the final state question here. And again, this is a constitutional amendment that would essentially blow open the doors for property taxes and would allow local control of property taxes, and if they want to use it for buildings, that's fine. If they want to use it for operations and teacher pay, that's fine. So it would really change the way that property taxes are used in Oklahoma, and right now this one is failing. This state question is failing. 47% yes, 53% no, but again, it is still early. Let's return now to U.S. House District 1, the Congressional District 1 that covers Tulsa and Washington and Wagner counties. And Tristan Land, News on 6's Tristan Land, is at the Democratic candidates watch party. Tim Gilpin. Tristan, how are you doing?
Hey Dave, here at the Jazz Hall of Fame, folks are trickling on in and seats are filling up right now. Several different candidates are giving their speeches. You know, the energy in the room is just crazy here right now. Earlier, Tim Gilpin told us that he believes tonight's winner would be based on who he was able to get to the polls tonight. And Gilpin is a former assistant district attorney. He also served on the Oklahoma State Board of Education for 6 years, where he fought for support for education funding. He has since earned the support of teachers and educators from across Oklahoma. Tonight, his camp told me that they're confident that they did all that they could to snag the Democratic nomination for Oklahoma's first congressional seat. And we'll be here all night as those returns start to come in. People here are lining up. They're introducing several different candidates here tonight, Dave. So once again, we should be hearing from Tim Gilpin just here shortly.
All right, Tristan, thank you very much. Again, Democratic candidate for House District 1, which covers Tulsa and Washington and Wagner counties and parts of a couple other counties as well. That would be a big upset if Tim Gilpin won, and right now Kevin Hearn comfortably in the lead with just single-digit precincts reporting, but still jumping out to a big lead early on. Let's talk about another race that is at the top of everyone's mind. This is the big one right here, the governor's race that we're expecting expecting, and the big one in the sense of this is the one we're expecting to be the closest, and the governor's race is shaking out that way currently. Republican Kevin Stitt, he's up 51% to 41% on Drew Edmondson. So both of them have about 70,000 votes. Kevin Stitt about 75,000 votes. Drew 69,000 votes. And then Libertarian Chris Powell, he is pulling in that all significant 3 percentage points in such a tight race like this. That could keep this very close all night. And he's at 3,800 votes. You can see at the bottom there, we now have 3% of the precincts reporting now 40 minutes after the polls have closed. For Lieutenant Governor, Republican Matt Pinnell comfortably out front here with 4% in. He's got 58% for him. Anastasia Pittman, state senator, has 39% in her favor, and then independent Ivan Holmes has 3% in the race for lieutenant governor. So Matt Pinnell jumping out to a big lead after he survived the primary and the runoff, and then made it here. Attorney General Mike Hunter, the incumbent, is leading, opening up a big lead on Democrat candidate Mark Miles, Oklahoma City Attorney Mark Miles, who hasn't done a lot as far as advertising. We really haven't seen him much here in Tulsa as far as any type of yard signs or TV or radio ads. So Mike Hunter has continued to pour money into that campaign since the primary, and then that very tooth and nail runoff with Gentner Drummond. And he appears to continue to roll, the incumbent attorney general, up 20 percentage points here early on, 4% of precincts reporting. We have the state superintendent of public schools. This is a 3-person race, and the incumbent, Republican Joy Hoffmeister, she is up comfortably in the early running, 57% for her. Dr. John Cox, who's the PEGS superintendent, he has 37 percentage points. And then the independent Larry Huff, who interestingly threw his support behind John Cox and endorsed him. Larry Huff still pulling in 6% there for the superintendent job. And now in Tulsa County, or the U.S. House District 2, let's move to District 2, because this is a large district, as you know, that it goes from northeast Oklahoma to southeast Oklahoma, takes up a major chunk of eastern Oklahoma, and the incumbent Mark Wayne Mullen, now with 6% of precincts reporting, the incumbent Mark Wayne Mullen opening up a more than 20-point lead on Democrat candidate Jason Nichols, who's the Tahlequah mayor. So Mark Wayne Mullen pulling in 18,500 votes, and Jason Nichols at 10,000. Independent John Foreman is at 2%, and Libertarian candidate Richard Castaldo at 2% there in District 2. And then House District 3. Some of you watching us are in that district. It's expansive. It goes from the Panhandle down to southern Oklahoma, southwest Oklahoma, all the way up to the doorstep of Tulsa County, a huge, huge district. And perennial candidate Frankie Robbins is losing to the perennial incumbent Frank Lucas, 73% to 27%. Again, it's still early on, but this is one of those districts, all three, in fact, U.S. House districts, the national GOP party is counting on going their way. So those are the results for the House districts, the 3 of them in our area, in our viewing area. Again, if you're watching us on Facebook Live, thank you so much. This is our digital desk coverage of the 2018 midterm elections. Of course, we also have 5 state questions that are on the ballot as well, and those results have been pretty close. We aren't seeing any of those state questions except for the Marsy's Law. Marsy's Law is winning big right now, but all the other state questions have been pretty close at this point. So we have, something that we want to remind you of tonight is that we have reporters all across the state, in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, at national watch parties, at state watch parties, candidate watch parties. They are all across the state right now. So let's go to state questions now. I was mentioning those a little bit earlier. State question 793, and this would allow optometrists to practice in retail stores and kind of give them a wide swath, be able to practice within a retail establishment, be able to sell prescription optical goods, so prescription glasses. And it would also, this state question would allow the legislature to restrict certain things, including certain surgeries and the number of locations. So right now, state question 793, we have 52% yes and 48% no. State Question 794, this is Marcy's Law that would enshrine certain crime victim rights into the Oklahoma Constitution. It should be mentioned 6 states are voting on Marcy's Law measures tonight: Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Nevada, North Carolina, and here in Oklahoma. And here in Oklahoma, 78% yes in favor of it and 22% no. We've seen a lot of advertising on TV. We saw the commercial from Kelsey Grammer, big money in the Marcy's Law campaign. State Question 798, which would combine governor with lieutenant governor onto the same ticket, that would start in the 2026 general election cycle. And you can see there just 8% of precincts reporting. So it is still early, and already we've seen almost 190,000 votes cast, 46% in favor and 54% against combining that ticket. Now moving on to State Question 800. This would set aside 5% of gross production taxes on oil and gas to help fund the state government. It would create a fund that would increase by a certain percentage every year, and then after that the state treasurer would deposit 4% of that into the general revenue fund. So kind of a confusing deal there, but State Question 800, it is failing right now, 42% to 58%. And let's move now to the governor's race just to show you this again, because we are seeing those percentage increases, those precincts jumping up, and Kevin Stitt has opened up a bigger lead now, 52% to 45% over Democrat candidate Drew Edmondson, and Chris Powell pulling in 3% on the Libertarian side. And so speaking of Drew Edmondson and Drew Edmondson's campaign, let's talk with News on 6's Brian Dorman, who's in Oklahoma City for us. Brian?
Yeah, Dave, those numbers so early, really not rattling or affecting the mood here in the room. Of course, I have one of Drew's supporters here. We are live on Facebook Live, News on 6 in Tulsa. Tell everybody what your name is and where you're from.
I'm Drew Cole, and I'm from Duncan, Oklahoma.
Okay. And Drew, you're a teacher.
I am a teacher. I teach media at Duncan High School.
Okay. Tell me why you support Drew Edmondson for governor.
My family's known the Edmondsons for a long time. My dad was a personal friend of his, but I'm ready for a change. I think the Republicans have had long enough time to get the state in the state that it is. Being a teacher, I know Drew will back teachers. He was there at the walkout. Without the walkout, I would not have been able to go into teaching this year for the first time. And so without the teacher raises, literally I wouldn't have been able to go into teaching, something I've wanted to do for years and years. My wife's a teacher. My father was an educator for 50 years. And I think to change Oklahoma, we've got to start at the core and start with changing our children, changing our core values, taking care of them at the beginning. And I believe Drew's the man to make that happen.
Drew, is there anything about Kevin Stitt or his campaign that maybe turned you off a bit? Because he supports teachers too.
I've never felt the genuine nature to it. You know, he came out early on and said he would not have supported the teacher raise. I don't believe really anybody that puts their kids in private school and then talks about the wonderful nature of public school, I think is slightly hypocritical. I have never felt like the private sector translates unequivocally to being able to run government. There's drastically different rules and laws that are involved, and I think Drew has the wherewithal and the time put in to know what Oklahoma needs and to be able to navigate the really, really messy political climate that we're in. You know, a bipartisan person like Drew, I think is what the state needs right now.
What do you feel like the pulse is when you're talking to your colleagues, you're talking to parents? Do you feel like most of them were throwing their support behind Edmondson, or do you feel like they were throwing their support behind Stitt?
Well, of course, you know, being at a school all day long, heavily supported by Edmondson for sure. Now, I do have a lot of Republican friends, staunch right-wingers, you bet, and my beliefs are a lot more moderate. So I think Duncan, where I'm from, I really feel like was kind of split down the middle. You know, Duncan being a oil town for sure, had Halliburton there forever. But you know, oil going up and down. I've actually been in retail for the last 30 years, and you know, the retail economy goes with oil in Oklahoma, and it's been hard to ride out those times.
Drew, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Watch your step here going off the rise, or we're up a little bit high here. It's a little hard to get up and down from here. There you have it, Dave. That's just one person's take on why they are supporting Drew Edmondson tonight. A teacher, so I thought that was a fascinating person to bring up here just to chat with and kind of see what the pulse is, at least through the public school system. Dave, back to you.
Yeah, Brian, thank you so much for that interview. And already tens of thousands of people have voted over. By my count, just doing a quick math, almost 200,000 votes have come in, with these precincts now reporting getting closer to double digits. The last check was 8% precinct reporting. So that's what we have for you for now on the Digital Desk. We will be back with more here on Facebook Live as we continue to bring these election results, leading right up to the news at 9 on the Tulsa CW. And of course, Terry and Craig will have updates for you on TV as well. We'll see you in a minute.